What's up, everyone? I know that opening may have you wondering if you've accidentally stumbled onto Grandpa's porn stash. Don't worry, that was just a scene from the Twilight Zone episode, Perchance To Dream. Get ready for some trippy shit as we continue our marathon of reviews. Please note, spoilers are ahead. Perchance To Dream is episode 9 from season 1. The episode was written by one of the great Twilight Zone writers, Charles Beaumont, and it was based on his short story of the same name, which was first published in the 1958 issue of Playboy. Rod Serling opened this ominous episode with the following narration. 12 o'clock noon. An ordinary scene, an ordinary city. Lunchtime for thousands of ordinary people. To most of them, this hour will be a rest, a pleasant break in a day's routine. To most, but not all. To Edward Hall, time is an enemy, and the hour to come is a matter of life and death. Serling's narration served as a great setup and clearly hinted at the mysteries and horror that lay ahead. Up front, there was some rather impressive cinematography, the view of the skyscraper and the downward pan foreshadowing the dark events to come. Richard Conte was the star of this episode, and he knocked it out of the park. He was very intense and did a great job portraying a doomed soul at his wit's end. Conte played Edward Hall, an emotionally drained and exhausted man who had been awake for 87 hours. Edward was referred to a psychiatrist's office by his regular doctor, who was unable to help him. Aside from his inability to sleep, Edward also mentions his vivid and overactive imagination. He views the power of his mind as a curse that he's unable to shake. The psychiatrist, Dr. Rothman, is played by John Larch, who we'll recall played the father in the iconic episode It's a Good Life. Edward describes dreaming in chapters, much like old-school adventure serials. In the dreams, he recounts being in a bizarre carnival with a woman named Maya, who's trying her best to literally scare him to death. This is no joke. Edward has a cardiac condition. At 15, he was diagnosed with a rheumatic heart. Maya's attempts to frighten him will very likely kill him. Edward's in a bad spot. If he goes to sleep, he knows he'll return to the nightmare and he'll have a fatal heart attack. But if he remains awake any longer, the strain will be too much on his heart. He'll die anyway. At this point, if a dark figure haunting your dreams and fear of sleep are giving you Nightmare on Elm Street vibes, rest assured you're not alone. Many have speculated about this episode serving as inspiration for Freddy Krueger in the Nightmare on Elm Street series. We'll come back to that. Moving along, the bulk of this episode consists of Edward recounting his terrifying and episodic nightmares to the psychiatrist. The disturbing dream portions are definitely the highlight of this episode. It's here that the sheer dread and haunting atmosphere completely take over. The otherworldly score by Nathan Van Cleave is creepy as hell and complements this episode. Maya the Cat Girl, as played by Suzanne Lloyd, was great as the villainous carnival dancer. She's a seductive figure who finds a sick pleasure in haunting Edward. Her tactics are varied. She's obviously got the whole seduction thing down, but she's also manipulative and mocking toward him. Initially, she lures Edward into a funhouse. That alone nearly does him in. One creepy carnival prop after the other. Obviously, a funhouse is not the place for someone with a severe heart condition. Ultimately, Maya lures Edward onto the roller coaster ride with her. He knows this will be the death of him, but of course he can't resist her. The dream ends apparently right before Maya shoves Edward off the roller coaster. This will kill him in the dream and in real life. By the conclusion of the episode, Edward gives up hope. He states that Dr. Rothman can't help him, and he exits the office. But he stops when he realizes that the doctor's receptionist is the same girl from his dreams. Horrified, he returns to Dr. Rothman's office and jumps out the window to his death. Now, I mentioned earlier the eerie shot of the skyscraper. I do feel that was basically foreshadowing Edward's eventual demise. But wait, this is Twilight Zone, so we need even more of a twist than this. We next see the doctor call his receptionist into his office, where Edward is actually still on the couch. Dr. Rothman tells the receptionist that Edward came in, sat down, and instantly fell asleep. A few moments later, he let out a scream and passed away. So as it turns out, the whole episode was a dream. A dream within a dream within a dream within a dream. Furthermore, or maybe just to confuse things a bit more, Maya was apparently just a projection from when Edward initially walked into the office, meaning his recounting of the dream was the dream. Now, if any of that confuses you, good. Dreams are supposed to do that. Anyway, Rod's closing narration does clear things up a little bit. They say a dream takes only a second or so, and yet, in that second, a man can live a lifetime. He can suffer and die, and who's to say which is the greater reality? The one we know, or the one in dreams, between heaven, the sky, the earth, and the Twilight Zone. So this is another episode where there's obviously a lot going on. The nature of dreams played a big part. Time compression within the dream, hidden themes, and symbolism were also prevalent. In Edward's case, his impending death and his fear of dying was the centerpiece. Edward was clearly a tortured soul. I mean, he dreamt of suicide, and likely even viewed the act as a terrifying but necessary release from his suffering. But I wonder, was it just a matter of Edward fearing death and seeking a release, or did he long for a more normal life? A life he was deprived of due to his heart condition. He seemed incapable of joy and unable to partake in excitement. No scares, no shock, he wasn't even allowed to walk upstairs. So up to this point, he's obviously lived a very rough life. It was noted in the Twilight Zone Companion by Mark Scott Zickrey that the writer of this story, Charles Beaumont, had a troubled life too. He had a very difficult childhood and suffered from spinal meningitis. To make matters worse, his mother struggled with mental illness and was very unstable. I wonder how personal this story was to Beaumont. Early on, the character Edward mentioned his mother once telling him to stare at a picture of a boat until he could see it move. He even claims he was able to see the boat move. But this bit of backstory feels somewhat peculiar. Let's assess this situation. We have the character Edward, suffering from a health condition, and a subtle hint of possible childhood neglect. This may well have led to Edward's dangerously overactive imagination, and ultimately, his obsession with death. Hate to say it, but these elements mirror Charles Beaumont's early life and feel autobiographical in nature. There's also the fact that Beaumont was said to have dreamed in sequins and even had a fear of roller coasters. So there's that. I'm not sure about Maya the cat lady. As we all know, dreams in general are wide open for interpretation. Did Maya represent death for Edward, or his fear of dying? Did she represent his fear of living? Maya was often seen as dark yet tempting, so was she meant to symbolize Edward's suicidal thoughts? Just to follow up on that early reference to A Nightmare on Elm Street, to answer the question, no, Wes Craven is on record stating his work was not inspired by this episode of Twilight Zone or Beaumont's short story. Craven found inspiration for A Nightmare on Elm Street through an article in the LA Times. The story was about a refugee child from Cambodia who was terrified to sleep for fear that he would be attacked in his dream and never wake up. Sadly, the child did die in his sleep, although there was a rare Nightmare on Elm Street novel with the same name, Perchance To Dream. Anyway, I liked this episode a lot, but it did leave me with a few more questions than it did answers, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Perchance To Dream is a memorable episode for sure. It's a friggin' thrill ride. It's filled with straight nightmare fuel. It's thoroughly disorientating, which is appropriate considering the subject matter. Again, Richard Conte was awesome in this episode. You really root for the guy to conquer his fears, and you hate to see him come out on a losing end. Suzanne Lloyd was also great. She gave a haunting depiction of a dream demon long before Freddy was on the scene. So if you get a chance, definitely check this one out. I give the episode 5 out of 5 creepy-ass carnival monstrosities.